All right, and we're live, everyone. I think StreamYard used to count down from 3, but it doesn't seem to do that anymore. But in any case, I'm really excited to have Laura here today. Laura, you and I connected recently on your show. You were doing Her Story, and I was a guest on your show, and it came up that you own an olive grove in Italy, and that sounds so romantic. So I wanted to ask you all these things about olive oil. You're an olive oil expert, which is why you're here today. And why don't we get started by introducing yourself to the listeners of Bite Me and how you came to be this olive oil goddess?
Hello, my name is Laura Hamilton, and I am part of the pair of sisters who own Casa Sorelle, which means House of the Sisters. Sorelle is sisters in Italian. And we started our little olive oil importing business a few years ago now, which unfortunately has really become economically unviable for reasons which will become apparent after I continue droning on. Yes, my sister and I were in the process of doing our like 20-year plan. You know, looking
Hmm.
for kind of where do you see yourself in 20 years and then work backwards to today. And we're like, okay, we're approaching retirement. Uh, where do you want to go? Like, do you want to stay in Toronto? Do you want to go somewhere else? And neither one of us have any interest in going to British Columbia or to Florida. Like,
Hmm. Those are the two places Canadians like to go. It's
and I
true.
gotta say, no, thank you. Like, you do you, but I have zero interest in either one of those locations. And we opened up the atlas and we looked at each other. We're like, well, whose food do you like? And we just kind of ended up, and who do you want to tolerate? Like when you're an older person, who do you want to be around?
Hmm.
Right? So we're like, okay, well, sorry, France, but I'm not dealing with French people when I'm old. And and we have a family history. My great grandparents were from Calabria, and I know it has a bad reputation. Okay, I know that it whatever. Like people are always like, oh, Calabria, the mafia. The mafia are
Oh,
in Calabria, and I'm like,
okay.
the mafia are everywhere. Like to say, and I'm buying a house. I'm not importing coke or hookers. So you
Right.
know, I'm looking for retirement. What are they going to do with two old biddies from Canada who probably have employed their idiot cousins to clean their house? Like,
Right.
what kind of crime kingpin do you think I am? Right? It's like, I just want to go eat some good food and have naps, and then go float around in the Mediterranean Sea. That's it. Like, whatever crime spree you think I'm heading towards, like, give me a break. So we ended up looking at Calabria just because of its bad reputation. The prices of the real estate are super affordable. Certainly, I'll tell you this, more affordable than anything in British Columbia or Florida
Mhm.
in terms of what our expectations were with the budget that we had. And Calabria has a lot of affordability, but also was open for foreigners to purchase without being a citizen. Mm, sorry, I had to have a sip of coffee.
Right,
Speed
speaking
my
of Italy.
I'm getting hysterical because I'm talking
Yeah.
about Calabria. And we ended up hooking up with a really great real estate agent who was originally from Manchester, who married somebody local and then decided to move their family from Manchester to Calabria. And we ended up hooking up with her, and she became our eyes and ears for property that had potential. And like our description was, we want something that we can just go, like it's already done. Even if it's like some furnishings or whatever, we don't care, but just something where that my sister and I can just go and hang out with and vacation wise, but also potentially rent out to people for like Airbnb and stuff like that, right? And as well as we were scouring international like house hunter sites where it's like, okay, let's just go South Italy, Calabria, and just look at least 10,000 pictures. At least. This was not an immediate decision. We saw a couple of places, we put in offers, but you know, it's kind of difficult because of the way that the real estate market is constructed in Italy, that if you put a bid in, it has to be the bid that's that. You can't go, I'm going to give you this much. No, you can't do that. Your initial bid has to be what they're asking. And unfortunately, we missed out on a couple of places. And but you know, we still had that long horizon, and we weren't kind of hysterical. So we just kept looking for a good, solid, I would say almost a year of properties. And my sister saw one, and she ended up going solo without me to Italy to see a property that we both saw online. We're like, yeah, go see this in person. See if it's really good. She ends up, unfortunately, we missed out by like 24 hours of putting it in. I'm like, oh, fuck. So the real estate agent was so nice and lovely. She's like, look, I'm really sorry, but you know, this is how it goes in Italy. You know, welcome to the beautiful frustrations of this country. And she's like, but I got some good news for you. This property came up because they dropped the price, because it's been on the market for a long time. And she's like, we know it's not exactly what you were looking for, but do you want to go see it? And my sister was in the car. And before the real estate agent had opened up the front door for my sister to walk in, she called me on the phone and was like, we're buying this place. Like, that was it. It's a beautiful piece of property, beautiful views. It's close enough and far away at the same time. Like, it's close enough to stuff. It's half an hour from the airport.
Well, that's nice.
And it's an international airport.
Right.
And because of the amount of Calabrese people, which is prevalent in Ontario, they have charter flights in the summer.
Oh, nice.
Everybody, yeah, because they all go hang out at their family homes for the summer, and you can understand why, because it's such a lovely area. It's not really hugely built up in terms of international tourists, so you get the full impact of Italians on vacation, as well as Italian culture everywhere. And that's really fun, because like, where do Italians go on vacation? Right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you where they go. They go to the south.
Right.
And they go to the countryside. And they go to their family homes. There's a couple of different spots on the coast, but there's a significant portion of Italians that go south for their family vacations. So we ended up understanding why they do that, because the food is excellent. It is so easy to get into that pace of life where you're like, okay, I'm going to float around in this water. And then, you know, you can see the Italians because you can book hotel rooms, and they provide you with board, like lunch and dinner.
Oh,
so
nice.
all of a sudden you're sitting on the beach and it becomes empty. And you're like, what? Is there like a tsunami coming? Like, what the hell's going on? Where did everybody, like, they all of a sudden like look at their watches and stand up and leave? And we're like, what is going on? And that's when we realized, oh, they're going in for lunch. And like, their lunches are like 2.5 hours, because there's like 100 courses.
Right. I've heard that about Italian meals. Yeah.
I went to the one hotel that was we in our little area for their New Year's Eve, and there was 12 courses of
Wow.
dinner. And by the end, you're so full, you're angry. It's like, no, it's like, stop bringing food towards me. Like, don't even. And then and like, I think it was at midnight, that's when they brought out all of the trolley carts of the pastries. And I'm
Mm.
like, I know you've got a sweet tooth. You
Yeah, I do.
You would have been elbowing the nonas in the
Yeah.
head. I'm getting there and there first. Yeah, like it with the amount of food, it was actually, oh, I feel sick just thinking about how much food I ate that night. But yeah, the food in the South is very different from the food in the North.
Mm. Mhm.
So if you like spicy food, there's
Mhm.
a lot of spice in at their end, a lot of olive oil.
Mm.
And I know this is like the longest intro to all my experience with olive oil. We end up buying an olive farm. This property that my real estate agent showed my sister was an olive farm that a family had tried to sell because the parents had passed away. The children were in their 60s and 70s, and it's, their children, like the grandchildren, had zero interest in going to this place in the summertime. So we're like, why do we have it? Nobody's interested. And my sister and I said, we're interested. We're totally interested. And that's how I learned about olive oil, because like, I'm Canadian. What do I know about olive oil? I know it's a tree, and
Mhm.
and it's a really long-lived tree. And
Right.
you know, you can, and I like eating it with on my salads. Like
Yeah.
that's what they knew, right?
That's about what I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And through that experience of having this property with olives and harvesting and bottling and trying to, like, thinking, hey, we can import this oil because we have about 400 trees or 500. I can't remember now. I think it's 400. What are we going to do with all this oil? And like, I know that Canadians love olive oil, and also as like a bombiniere, which is like a wedding gift. I'm
Mm.
like, stop giving me stupid shot glasses.
Right.
Instead, I'd rather have a bottle of olive oil.
Right.
Thank you very much. That's a good gift. Thanks. Thank you. So we were using that as our business idea. Italian olive oil straight from Italy, straight from the farm. And that's what we ended up learning about harvesting and bottling and all of this stuff, which is why I wanted to bring up my first point of order. And that
Mhm.
is the dumbest thing that you will see on any label of olive oil is cold pressed extra virgin olive oil.
Okay, so I was hoping we would talk about that today because I see all these different types of olive oil. There's extra virgin and regular olive oil
Right.
and cold pressed. I see that a lot. And I don't really know what the differences are between all of those things.
Okay. Cold pressed is nothing but marketing.
Okay.
Okay. Because if it says cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, all that means, cold pressed, it means it's the first pressing. It means that they don't have to generate power. It's not the heat that's part of the extraction process.
Mhm.
It's just you put the fruit and then you crush it.
Right. You squish it
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the first pressing. That is extra virgin olive oil by definition.
Okay.
So you putting in any label that I see cold press, and I'm also guilty of that, putting it on a label, because
Mhm.
like that's what people wanted to hear. Oh, it's cold pressed extra virgin. All extra virgin olive oil. In order to have that label, extra virgin olive oil must be cold pressed,
So it's
because
all cold pressed.
it's all cold pressed. If it's extra virgin olive oil, it is always cold pressed.
Okay.
So when you see it, and I know that we put it on our label because that's what people wanted to see because they kept
Mhm.
asking us. And soon as I realized that, I'm like, oh my God, you don't know anything if you're asking me if it's cold pressed.
That's why some of these things perpetuate too. Because I've talked to people in the cannabis industry as well who are like, there's a reason why you keep seeing indica and sativa on certain labels. It's because that's how the consumer understands it. And it's so hard to change and to educate people. Like it just takes a long time. And yeah,
Absolutely.
if you don't know anything about
Absolutely.
olive oil, you look for the cold press, but now everybody, extra virgin olive oil is always cold pressed.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. But like when I meet people and they ask if they say to me, oh, is it cold pressed? I know that you know nothing. But
right.
so for me, it's an indicator of
Yeah,
like, oh, I see that you've read something somewhere on a label and you think that that's important. It's not
right,
important. It is like
right.
has zero relevance.
Yeah.
What's important is the extra virgin part
Okay.
because in order to have that label in the EU, in
Mhm.
order to have that certification of extra virgin olive oil, your product must be pressed within a 48-hour to 72-hour period.
Okay, like within so 48 to 72 hours after harvest?
Correct. It
Right.
must
Okay.
be pressed. Why? Because you are looking at the water content
Okay.
and the acidity level. Because as soon as that fruit starts losing the liquid within it, it
Mhm.
becomes more bitter.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't want a drier olive then.
Mhm.
And you have to have that certification. And
Okay.
you have to have the evidence of this is when we harvested and this is we put it on the truck and this is like the factory is called a Frantoio and they're the ones that certify when they pressed it.
Okay.
So that end result, olive oil, the first one is the extra virgin olive oil, and that will get up. There's your stamp.
The stamp of approval. So does that mean virgin olive oil is just
That's the second round.
older? It's what, sorry?
It's the second round.
The second round. Okay.
Okay, because the first pressing
Mhm.
is the easy one. And then it gets, as it goes down, that's when you have the olive oil designations. Like
Right.
it's not going to say extra virgin,
Right.
it's going to say olive oil.
Mhm.
And it's not that it's bad, okay? Like it's just that it's going to have, to me, a more acidic, more bitter, darker flavor to it.
Okay. So there's really only two types of olive oil then. It's extra virgin or
And then the
olive oil.
rest.
And then the
And then
rest.
and then as it goes down, then you have something called pumice oil, which is basically the oil that they get after they've ground all the pits.
Okay. I've never seen pumice oil before.
Usually that is not for like culinary purposes.
Oh, I see. Would it be
Uh,
more how would they
like
use it
back in
then?
the day, that's what the peasants ate,
Oh, okay.
you
Right.
know. And that is it can be used for like soaps or something like that.
Right.
Something that you're not necessarily going to be eating.
So it's not food
On a,
grade at that point.
I mean it all is like
Mhm.
it all is. It's just that I think people would be like, "Ooh, this is really bitter and dark, and I don't like it."
Right.
So
Is it thicker then? Like when I think pumice
and
oil and you talk about grinding pits, I'm imagining something almost
it's very dark. It's like
okay.
you'd look at it and go, "Is this olive oil?" It's awfully
Right.
dark and brown.
So is that because they're grinding up the pits with the olives? Like everything just gets
All
pressed
the
or
all of the flesh has gone by then,
oh, so it's just the pits.
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, I see. So is to recap then, there's extra virgin olive oil, and then pumice oil.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as like using it for cooking, what would the differences be? Because I'm always a little confused about that as well. Some people are like, "Oh, you shouldn't use extra virgin olive oil to cook," and
Oh,
y
I've heard that too.
yeah.
Oh yeah, if it burns, you're gonna get cancer. If that was the case, there would be no Italians left because they all would have died of cancer.
Right, because 'cause they're all eating olive oil.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
if you notice that some of those, like, what do they call them? Blue pin or blue tick, whatever, areas where people live into their hundreds. Guess where
Oh,
that
the
is?
blue zones. Yeah.
Yeah. Guess
Yes.
where they are? South of Italy. So if you
Yeah, it's
think
the
that, like,
Mediterranean
cooking with
diet.
olive oil is a
Yeah.
disaster, I got some, like, people who are under 120 who are still making pasta that would disagree
Right.
with you.
Yeah.
So yes, and I've heard of those studies. They have since been. I know this study you're referring to, and as far as I know, that has been discredited a couple of years ago, where it's like there's just absolutely no evidence that this is a cancer causing
Mhm.
situation when you have heated olive oil to cook with.
Right.
Now that being said, um, I don't like frying with olive oil just because of the change of taste, because olive oil doesn't like to be a frying vessel. But if it's the only shit you've got, then use it, man. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not
Mhm.
judging you. It's just not going to get stuff crispy like something like a vegetable oil or coconut oil,
Okay.
just because of the heating point of olive oil. It just doesn't make it great for frying.
Yeah, it
But
has a lower smoke point.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
So, it's up to you. If you want to
Mhm.
deal with that, how about it? But I'm not doing that necessarily. But I definitely use it quite liberally on my pasta to make one of my favorite recipes. This is like garlic, lots of olive oil, a couple of anchovies, and that's it. Then
Mm.
you put some chili flakes and the true sign of my peasant heritage. Nobody could afford a huge amount of cheese because Parmesan
Mhm.
cheese is expensive. So what do
Mhm.
they use? They use toasted breadcrumbs with spice.
Hmm.
They toast the breadcrumbs and they
Mhm.
put that on top of the pasta. It's carbo loading, yes, yes, but it's so delicious.
It
So,
sounds lovely, and I
oh
love,
yeah.
like, drizzling olive oil on my pasta afterwards, and I usually use a little bit too just to keep it from sticking after I've cooked it and stuff as well. Yeah.
Sure, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
But
So I
basically, you're saying that you can cook with like, you can fry with olive oil. Is there really any distinction then between the extra virgin and the regular olive oil?
Well,
As
other than the cost,
Yeah.
like, go ahead, fry with your extra virgin olive oil, but,
Mhm.
every however many fluid milliliters you're putting on there is this many dollars.
Right.
So, if you wanna do that, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Maybe you, like, light your joints with $20 bills too. Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
do not. I do
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, so how about it, Haas? Go ahead. And like to me, you kind of lose the quality of what makes extra virgin olive oil worth the price, and that is the flavor. And
Right.
you can really, when you have really good olive oil, then the next time you have like what you buy in the supermarket, it's like it says olive oil on the label, but it's barely olive oil.
Right. So there's been a lot of talk about that over the years of like fake olive oil and rancid olive oil and these things.
Yeah.
And sometimes at these companies in wherever they are, Italy, I said a lot of them would be
Italy is the
bottling
worst. Italy
would be
is the
bottling
worst.
things like maybe it's more like grapeseed oil or something. How do you know what it is that you're buying? Or is there any way to know? Because I did hear somebody one time say, I think I saw this on TikTok, maybe put your olive oil in the fridge and obviously if it's not real, what was it? If it wasn't real olive oil, it would like, but I guess olive oil does that anyway. It would
Yeah.
get like olive oil doesn't like to be refrigerated. So I
No.
guess that doesn't really check out. Or maybe if it didn't like get all that texture that it changes into when it's cold, if it
I,
didn't do
I'd have
that,
to look that up. I'd
yeah.
have to look that up. For me, it's like, well, you could. splash out the cash to get it tested if you are that
Right.
curious.
I don't think anyone's
Um,
gonna do that though.
no, nobody's gonna do that.
Yeah.
And I know there's been a scandal in Italy for years. Okay,
Mhm.
years and years and years. So if you're buying a commercial olive oil from Italy,
Mhm.
there could be a chance that it's not necessarily 100% what you think it is.
Right.
And that's because they'll add like the top part will be extra virgin olive oil sitting, or they'll mix it in so that, the testing. And, you're never going to work around that, unfortunately,
Mhm.
unless you know the source.
Right.
And there are lots of ways to ensure that you know what you're getting. And that is,
Mm.
there's a lot of small producing olive oil farmers who have websites now where you can adopt a tree or that you can buy directly from them. And it costs money though. Like
Right.
if you're looking at a liter of olive oil in, dare I say, Loblaws,
Mhm.
and they're selling it for like $11.99. Well, it could be,
Right.
but that would mean pretty much all of Europe would have to be olive trees.
Right. Just sell it at that price. And, I've
Just
always
sell it that
wondered
right.
about that too because yeah, like I've seen a lot of olive oil brands in grocery stores. And
Sure.
yeah, but they don't tell you anything about it because I have bought olive oil before where they'll actually stamp on it like the harvest date and the pressing date or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe we're getting somewhere. But the price difference is obviously usually pretty extreme between these two bottles of olive oil. Yeah.
Exactly.
So is that pretty much the only way to determine, like, if you can see harvest date or press date if it's an extra virgin olive oil, is that the
Yeah.
only way to I guess they might could have a harvest date on it as well if it was a regular olive oil, but is that really the only way to know, like, if they're indicating that and maybe a price point that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the only way to really know if you're getting a legitimate olive oil?
Well, I'd also look to see on Google Earth where this place is,
Oh, okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
because in Europe, all your olive trees basically have to be accounted for,
Mhm.
especially in Italy because there's a lot of subsidies for maintaining your olive growth.
Right, because they want these smaller farms to continue producing.
Well, yes, and
Yeah.
also because like olive trees don't live on the same timeline we do.
Mhm.
And, 100 years, whatever. I live for thousands. Your
Right.
your little human life is immaterial to me,
Yeah.
right? And olive trees also only produce fruit every other year. Like
Oh, okay.
it's not like they're not producing huge amounts every year. They're not a
Mhm.
peach tree. They're not a cherry tree.
Mhm.
Like they don't give a shit about your human life, right? It's like, and on top of that, there's certain times a year where it's very fragile when it comes to producing its fruit. Like when the flowers come out and they need that pollination, if it's too windy, it's not getting pollinated, you have no fruit.
Hmm. So
So it's
something
like,
as simple as that, a windy season could mean no fruit.
that's it,
Right.
right? And trees generally only produce a large volume of fruit every 2 years.
Okay.
And within that, you're going to get about a 20% yield
Okay. From all the
from
olives.
all the olives. So
Mhm.
you can have 1,000 tons of olive fruit, but what comes out of that is only 20% of that large volume of fruit is going to be oil.
Now, a question that just came to my mind because I love eating olives as well. Like, how do they decide which olives they're going to bottle for eating? And which type of olive are they generally using to make olive oil? Is it the green olives?
Yes.
not Kalamata or anything.
If they're black, that means they've been sitting in the sun, or they're
Oh,
ripe.
okay. So
They're
that's a
ripe.
ripe.
That's a ripe one.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I just see the stuff in the store and I see the green ones stuffed with,
Sure.
garlic, which are my favorite, or the
Mhm.
Kalamata olives. But you're
Mhm.
saying that's just a mature, ripe olive.
Right. They start off
Oh,
green. They
okay.
start off green, and then the longer they sit on the tree, the darker they get. And that's
Okay.
because the water's being evaporated and they're drying out.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, as for olives
Mhm.
themselves, what we eat and what we press, they're both. Both of them are
Mhm.
it's the same olive.
Right. So they just decide if they want to do many groves do both, or do they usually take
Well,
all
it
of the
depends. Like
right.
in Calabria, our farm is exclusively the Carolea, which
Okay.
is um I think it's more on the sweeter end. And when I say sweet, I mean intensely bitter if you went and you put it in your mouth off a tree, right?
Mhm.
Like, I would take a bite because I did that.
Right.
Because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have olives. And then you
Yeah.
put it in your mouth and go,
I
oh
would
my
probably do the
God.
same.
It's
Okay.
so bitter and horrible that you're like, oh, ugh,
Right.
that's gross. And you can't believe that that fruit ends up, you press it and you go, this is the most delicious olive oil I've ever had in my life.
Hmm.
Um, so generally, like the Carolea olive is pretty much exclusively grown in the south of Italy. So my expertise is pretty narrow. Like I know about my trees.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's like I don't know about Greek trees or Spanish. I don't know. Whatever.
Right.
That's not my concern. My concern is like, are my trees going to grow fruit? I know that there's a lot of chatter about there's like a certain type of fly infestation that was hurting trees on the other side of Italy, and that's always a concern. It's like, where are those flies?
Mhm.
And what other animal eats those flies? Because I will, if it's ladybugs or whatever, plant them in the forest and and let them attack them. But
Mhm.
that to me, like I know about the Carolea.
Right.
That's unfortunately where my expertise ends. But um, when it comes to a consumer's knowledge of olive oil, my other big pet peeve is packaging.
Right. I was going to
Because
ask you about that because obviously being able to store your olive oil properly is going to extend its shelf life.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people say, oh, it's dark glass. Glass is still transparent, and light is a deadly enemy of olive oil preservation. So for me, metal containers
Mhm.
of and metal containers that contain olive oil have to be a certain type of metal in the EU. It
Right.
can't be just like it's the same metal as everything else.
Mhm.
No, it has to be a specific food grade metal container
Mhm.
specifically for olive oil. And you can have a shelf life for, depending, but certainly years. It wouldn't affect it. Whereas glass, everyone thinks, oh, glass is great, recyclable, it's going to protect the oil. No, because, like, if you can see through the glass, guess what? So can light.
I find that really interesting, and, like, what you're saying totally makes sense, but then why wouldn't more producers who are bringing they're all importing it into North America, for instance, why would they use glass instead of metal? Because I would assume glass is way more expensive to ship because of the weight.
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
more expensive. Why they do it, I don't know. Maybe they have like a good deal with a glass maker.
right.
I don't know. Because when we were doing our importing, we were
Mhm.
looking at packaging, and we looked at, I can't even tell you how many packaging options we looked at. Glass, what type of glass, what color, what this, what that.
Mhm.
And ultimately, we came to the conclusion that, there was a manufacturer who did small metal bottles. Um, and we liked it better for the preservation point that no light is going to get into
Mhm.
this. And it's recyclability, because you can only recycle glass once. That's
Oh, is
it.
that it?
That's it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can only recycle it once,
Mhm.
and then it becomes too brittle. So,
Mhm.
oh, it's recyclable. Yeah. Metal is endlessly recyclable. You just have to
I
melt it. It
Right.
doesn't lose its integrity.
Okay. I did not know that because I do buy a lot of things in glass myself
Mhm.
just because I try not to use too much plastic, but I usually also save I have a cupboard full of glass jars that I've saved because I can't get rid of them, but they do come in
Yeah.
handy. So there's
Yeah,
that. But
yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, well, this is the thing about, like, yes, I try and avoid plastic
Mhm.
because you can't really recycle plastic even once, I don't think.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas glass, you can do it once. Whereas
Mhm.
metal, you can do it endlessly.
Okay.
So,
So even from an environmental standpoint, metal
yeah,
is preferred and will help preserve your olive oil for a lot longer.
exactly.
Now, if you're someone
Exactly.
that uses olive oil on a regular basis, though, is a big of a concern? Like, I don't tend to have a bottle of olive oil last me years just because I'm using it, I'm consuming it.
Yes, exactly. So if you're buying, but you can readily go to a store and get olive oil.
Right.
Whereas, like, people who wanted to maybe buy in bulk,
Right.
um, for me, it's like, if you want to buy in bulk, then buy bulk in metal,
Right.
as opposed to in glass. Yeah, if you're consuming it, like, within a couple of weeks of you purchasing it, then you can relax.
Right.
Um, However, like, for like the because I have seen some really expensive olive oil in clear glass, and I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
like, dumb,
And
because,
is it
like,
assuming people are consuming it fast enough? Because I would assume also, like, a really expensive olive oil, you're not gonna be using that for any kind of pan frying or anything. You're gonna be using that as, like, a finishing oil or maybe making pesto or I don't know, things like that.
sure,
So you're not gonna be
sure,
using it as fast as an olive oil that you might be cooking with.
sure. But
Yeah.
if you're displaying this oil in
Mhm.
clear glass, then you've just wasted all that money.
Right.
That's when I'd be like, you should put that in a dark glass just to
Mhm.
preserve it, because it is precious.
Right.
But and people are like, "Oh, I want to see the oil." I'm like, then pour it
Eat it.
out, eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to see it? Pour it on this white saucer. Then you
Yeah.
can see it.
Yeah.
And that's when you really see the difference between certain types of grade of oil, is the color.
Okay.
Greener, is it golder, and then as it gets darker, then generally that it's certainly, is it all extra
So
virgin?
would green be like a better quality oil then versus the gold versus a darker oil?
Again, that comes down to the oil. Sorry, not the oil, the fruit itself. Like,
Okay.
what?
Right.
Because I've seen olives that are pure white.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
You look at
interesting.
Yes. So it depends on what olive the oil is coming from. And that's what I would like to see on labels, rather than the cold pressed garbage, is like, what olive did this come from?
Mhm.
Is more specifically, is what I would think that consumers should be more worried about.
Right. So how many different varieties of olives are there? There must be a number of them then. Kind of like a wine grapes, there's all kinds of
Absolutely.
varieties. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's all sorts of varieties and all sorts of climates that they thrive in.
Mhm.
For example, olives that are in, like, the area of Israel, Lebanon, those areas, those trees are going to be completely different from the trees of Greece, the trees of Italy, the trees of France. Like,
Mhm.
there's going to be a huge variety. Can't say, pretty much, that's like saying wine comes in red and white.
Right. Yeah. And
Oh,
anybody who's drank any wine knows that it's gonna taste very different depending on the grape,
yeah,
and I'm kind of glad you mentioned that because it also comes back to terroir. So do you find
yes,
that a lot of olive oils are going to taste differently depending on where they're grown, what variety, that kind of thing?
100%.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
And because I know what my olive oil from my place tastes like, and then when I try other olive oil, I'm like, oh, it's so bitter.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
or like, what's this? I know you become such a snob. It's terrible.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that I save my displeasure
Mhm.
for like commercial growers who are charging people an arm and a leg, and then you look at it and go, what's that? Oh, is that olive oil? Looks like grapeseed oil.
Mm.
So it's that's where I save it. But like to me, price points are legitimate concerns, and yeah, if you want to experiment with your money, then I would always suggest going straight to the farmer
Right.
and like forget going to your local grocer and expecting something fabulous.
Yeah,
Um,
and that makes a lot of sense. I don't know when I'll have a chance to go to an olive farm anytime soon,
oh,
as much as that's, now on my bucket list, but I think would like going to a specialty shop be a good alternative? Because I know there's a couple stores in
mhm,
my town where they would have probably a nice selection of olive oils, and
mhm.
now that I'm thinking about it, I'm kinda curious to go check it out because 'cause I've never really paid a whole lot of attention to it, but
Well, again, if this is going to be like I'm going to impress the neighbors oil,
Mhm.
make sure you see the harvest date on it
Right,
and really kind of quiz them. Otherwise, like I'm all for supporting the farmers direct,
right.
and there's lots of places where you can buy direct from the farmer,
Mhm.
and I'm always supportive of that sort of endeavor.
Okay.
Um, because again, your specialty shops have got to put up a huge markup to make it worth their while importing. Because I know
Mhm.
how expensive it is to bring oil into Canada. It's
Mhm.
very expensive.
Mhm.
Transportation costs, all of that stuff.
Mhm. Right. So is it still less expensive for a consumer to buy directly from a farm considering import fees? Because what you're saying makes sense. Like any store that's carrying an olive oil from a distributor is going to have to, mark up the price so they can make money on it.
Hmm.
But I don't see in some ways how that would be any cheaper than buying direct from a farm necessarily because the import fees, like you mentioned, are going to be probably substantial if you're ordering from Europe. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
there's some olive oil farms. I don't know how prevalent they are in California. I know there's at least one,
Hmm.
but that might be a
Yes.
little more cost effective because it's not being
Yes.
shipped as far,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. I know that there is quite a thriving olive oil business right now in California, so that might
Mhm.
be more viable.
Mhm.
I know that there are a lot of international olive oil websites where you can focus on if that, yeah, like that makes total sense. It
Mhm.
rather than bringing it in from Europe. I'm only looking at it from a European perspective just because that's where my place is. But
Right.
yeah, I would definitely look and see what's going on in California. That's certainly more viable.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And have you found any regions where you really like obviously you really like the olive oil from your region, but are there any other regions that you find you really like the flavor? 'Cause there was a long time ago, there was a shop in my town that would do, like, olive oil tastings, and you could
Hmm.
go in and they'd have different olive oils and you could try a little taste of it, and some of them were so like, it wasn't the olive oil that I'd grown up, you know, expecting because I,
Hmm.
for a long time, bought olive oil from a grocery store,
Sure.
but it was so different. Some of it was really peppery almost, and it was really nice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Peppery, my guess is peppery is like more like grease.
Okay.
Grease and grease. But like don't quote me on that. For me, like I've been to olive oil tastings, and I know that I really like the stuff from Spain.
Okay.
Spanish olive oil is quite delightful.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm so biased.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah,
it's just like, is this Italian?
right. So then where do you buy olive oil when you're in Canada, when you're in Toronto?
Uh, I gotta say, I've been buying it at No Frills,
Mhm.
but I'm not expecting it to be anything fabulous.
Right.
That's for my cooking. I
Yeah.
know that there's a couple of places in the city who are, oh, what is it called? My mind just went blank.
Mhm.
But it's on Bayview Avenue.
Okay.
The Olive something.
Mhm.
Um, and they're quite costly.
Yeah.
Um,
So you
so
buy
that
something
makes
from, like, a specialty shop.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's also Global Cheese. Global Cheese in Kensington Market is where if I wanted to buy something nice,
Right.
I'd go to Global Cheese.
Okay. I can put that in the show notes. If you think of the other one, you can always email me and I can include it in the show notes when this episode
Sure.
comes out because those around Toronto may be interested to know. But I guess, like you said, you buy some of your olive oil. I buy olive oil at Costco a lot of the times too. But from what I'm hearing you say, if I'm using it for cooking, I don't need to do the extra virgin. I can just do regular olive oil and then save the extra virgin for the other applications we talked about, like making pesto or
Absolutely.
drizzling it on your pasta or enjoying it with your fresh bread and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for someone like you,
Mhm.
who is also infusing oils,
Yes.
um, olive oil and cannabis chemically are really good friends.
Okay. I'm really happy you said that because I used to really be into coconut oil infused, and I always heard, oh, it was more bioavailable and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, more recently, I've been enjoying olive oil, infusing olive oil a lot more. I just maybe tastes have changed over the years or whatever. And so, is there anything you should consider when you're infusing olive oil that you might not
Well,
need to consider with other fats?
okay. For me, it
Hmm.
depends on what you're going to do with that infused olive oil
Right.
because I have infused olive oil and I've put it all over my body.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, all over my body.
Okay.
Because I was reading about how olive oil absorbs into human skin rather well too.
So it
So
makes a great topical, just as is.
yes,
Okay.
as is.
Mhm.
And I know that all of the Italian women of a certain age who lived in Italy, like they used it as like they put it all over their skin all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and cannabis and olive oil chemically fused together really, really nicely. And I
Mhm.
decided that after reading about how certain types of topical cannabis can be a sexual performance enhancer for women,
Mhm.
I was like, really? So then I was looking up, can I put olive oil on a certain part of my body? Is that going to be bad? And no, it's not bad. Okay, I'm
Okay.
not saying okay.
Mhm.
And I also read about certain strains of cannabis can have certain properties, including stimulation and
Mhm.
that sort of thing. So I did it myself. Like I infused the cannabis together with the olive oil, and I put it on myself, and then I gave it to my sister.
Mhm.
Put this on a certain area, and then tell me if it works
Well,
or
I
if
mean,
you
like,
notice anything.
cannabis-infused lubes are definitely a thing, and they're
Yes.
usually more used for, like, sexual enhancement than for lubrication per se.
Well,
So
this is enhancement. This is
yeah.
not gonna make you lubricated because the
Yeah.
olive oil will absorb into your skin, so it's not
Right.
going to it's not gonna make
Yeah.
things slide.
Yeah.
But what it does is it stimulates to produce your own.
Right. So you can use olive oil for like a sexual enhancement. You can
Yeah.
use it for a topical just all over your skin to moisturize. I've used olive oils in face oils as
Yes.
well because I really like it on my face too. So you could use it infused that way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, I guess infusing it with heat though is okay as long as you keep it to under a certain temperature.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And now I have a butter brewer
Mm-hmm.
machine,
Mm-hmm.
which does the decarboxylation as well as the infusing thing, and it's an automatic system. Have you ever seen those?
I don't know if I've seen the butter brewer. I have a couple of machines myself that will decarb and infuse, like an Ardent. I have a magical butter machine and a Levo. Um,
Okay.
I feel like they're
Yeah.
all probably relatively similar. They all have pros and
And
cons to
it
them,
has
but
like, does it have like the automatic turning?
that one, the magical butter machine does that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's okay. So that's what my
yeah,
butter brewer does. And,
right.
I just hit the button, decarb, okay, fine. And then it does it automatically. And then I pour in the olive oil in with the flour, and then you can have it turn
Hmm.
like
Like
however many
agitate
times a
it.
minute, or, if you want
Yeah.
to do it 2 times a minute or once a minute or whatever you want to do for the amount of time. And then it just
Hmm.
kind of infuses it. And then when it's done, it beeps and it's over. And
Right.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
it.
That's like a set it and forget it kind of device.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because the lid is like airtight, sealed, it
Hmm.
doesn't smell up the place either.
Right.
So nobody
Yeah.
is going to be like, "Oh, what are you doing in that apartment?"
Yeah. And that's an important consideration for a lot of people, like, if they're living in a place where it's, cannabis is still prohibited, or if you have roommates that aren't really crazy about it, or I don't know, there's all kinds of
Exactly.
reasons people don't wanna stink up their entire living space with the smell of cannabis.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
why I love it.
yeah.
It really keeps the smell down. And
Mhm,
that's, experimenting with that oil. That was a really fun summer because I was
mhm.
like, this is the first time that was when it was first legal. I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm totally infusing this olive oil and smearing it all over my body and see what happens.
Right.
And it was
So,
like,
when you're using it as a topical for any of those
mhm,
things we just talked about, would you be more likely to use an extra virgin olive oil? Or would
yeah.
you just use whatever? You would use the extra virgin?
Um, well, it it depends. Are
Right,
you gonna be eating it?
right,
If
right.
you're gonna be
Okay,
eating it, then I was like, why not go for the nice stuff? But
right.
if it's just one of the, I'm just going to, it's
Slather it
it,
all
it,
over the place.
it's not the special date night,
Mhm,
but it's just more like, yeah, I'm gonna have a nice afternoon.
mhm.
Then you don't need the extra virgin for that.
Now, also, as far as infusing goes, I have often used olive oil and used it to infuse, like, fresh herbs. I would get fresh
Yeah.
herbs from the market, and I would put my fresh basil in the olive oil, let it sit for a couple weeks, just give it a bit of a shake, and then you strain it, get rid of the plant material, and
Mhm.
that olive oil has the distinctive flavor of basil in it. And I love doing stuff like that because it also helps,
Sure.
it means in the winter time when it's the dead of winter, I can have this lovely basil infused olive oil. Could you do the same with cannabis? Like, do you have to heat it if you want it? You could put your decarb cannabis in the olive oil, or maybe not even decarbed. I'm just wondering.
Uh, I'm not sure because it depends to me. If you
Mhm.
didn't decarb it, then that acid has not
Yeah, the
changed. It,
potency is going to be much different. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
you're still going to get to me the benefit of it.
Mhm.
The chemical benefits of
Right.
cannabis would still be in there, but it's not going to be necessarily an intoxicating experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas if you do have the chemical change within the cannabis plant to go from THCA to THC, then it becomes an intoxicant. Whereas,
Right.
otherwise you can have really nice, healthy body and
Mhm.
cannabinoid system. But
Mhm.
are you going to be like tripping balls and looking at the sky? No,
Mhm.
no.
Right. Okay. I mean, that totally makes sense, but I think it would be interesting because you could use that as like a finishing oil and preserve some of the flavor of that cannabis that you're using in the olive
Mhm.
oil, which sounds really nice to me, the same way that you could put rosemary or basil or whatever in your olive oil.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it was when we finally were able to legally grow cannabis, and it was the first time I really experienced fresh cannabis leaves, and they're quite
Mhm.
delicious, I have to say. And it's just like, oh, I'm going to eat these leaves because, like, you got to trim the plant anyway.
Mhm.
So I'm going to munch on them, and you're like, wow, this is really. It's got a very distinct flavor, but it doesn't taste necessarily like weed.
Right.
But it adds like something, and you're like, oh, what's in this salad?
Yeah.
If you only knew. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, it's an herb.
Yeah.
So like it depends on what the end result is. Like
Mhm.
what you're aiming for. If you're
Right.
aiming for something that's healthy, then how about it? Put in the fresh stuff. Um, I would assume that dried would be better though. Um,
Yeah, from a perspective too of like if you're wanting to infuse your olive oil and actually get high from it, it's gonna
mhm,
need to be decarbed
yeah,
because the THCA, if you haven't decarbed it, like you said, it's not going to be it might have a little bit of potency, but it's gonna be much different than if you decarb it first. But again,
absolutely.
it's gonna depend on what you want it for as well.
Yes.
And yeah, maybe you just wanna preserve the flavor of the cannabis, and that's one way to do it. You know, when it's the dead of winter and you're like, "Oh, that was a lovely plant that I grew," and you can get the flavors in the olive oil and the olive oil, it sounds delightful to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And especially in the dead of winter, you're like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're like when you're longing to go to your olive grove in Italy,
Ugh.
you can have a little taste,
Oh,
maybe.
especially in January where I'm like,
Yeah,
why did my
yeah.
ancestors come here?
Of all places, right? Yeah,
Yeah, it's like what, or like the other part of me is like, why didn't you go to Australia? Because there's a
right.
huge Italian community in Australia too, and they can grow their own olives.
Do they grow olives in Australia?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's just like, oh my God. No, yeah, let's go to Canada. Great, great
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah,
Now
and that's the worst part, I think, is like
right.
I have like a live webcam that's like not necessarily on our property, but it's like just down the coast from us, and I look at it in the wintertime.
Mhm. Yeah, I I would be
Fine.
too. It'd be hard not to have it on your phone, like, all the time, but
Yeah.
yeah, then you're just torturing yourself, but, a couple more questions before we wrap up. Uh, what are some of the common misconceptions that people have about olive oil?
Hmm. Common misconceptions. Well, I think like the biggest misconception was the whole heating it will give you cancer.
Mm, mhm,
That kind of makes me crazy. Um and like there's so many health benefits from olive oil. I think that if anything, people just think it's like salad dressing. But actually, you can put it on your scalp, you can put it on your skin. Like human skin loves olive oil. It absorbs olive oil, it loves it. So it's safe for your skin. If
mhm,
your dog or cat licks it, it's not going to die. It's something that can be safe around children and your pets. It's not
mhm,
going to be a danger to them. So, and I
right,
think that's the misconception, is that maybe for me is that it's only used in culinary ways, when in fact
right,
olive oil was considered a really precious thing for everything. It was the oil they put in the wheels of the carts for the Roman Empire, kind of marching its way across Europe.
hmm,
Like they use that. They would always have olive oil and honey with
Right.
them.
Those are
So
two of my favorite things. So
yeah, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So I think the misconception is that it's just something to eat. Uh,
Right.
and there are so many other benefits that your skin would appreciate. And again, using it with a degree of caution, like, are you allergic? Do you already have oily skin? Like, don't at me because you get like acne because you put
Mhm.
olive oil on your forehead. Like, just don't at me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes sense though. Yeah, it really does. It is sort of like the way the cannabis plant can be used for so many things we don't always think about, but olive oil can also be used for a lot more than just, cooking up your eggs or sprinkling on salad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what are
Exactly.
your favorite ways to use olive oil when you're cooking or baking? Do you use it in baking at all?
Um, honestly, I'm really not a huge baker.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
I I'm just I'm a cook, not a
Mhm.
baker,
Right.
right? It's like to me, baking is like being working in a laboratory scientist. It's
Mhm.
like you follow the recipe. If you
Right.
don't follow the recipe, then your cake's going to be really low. And to give you an example of me being a baker, I thought baking soda and baking powder were the same.
Okay. Yep,
And
they're
then
different, although I couldn't tell you why necessarily, but I know they're different.
well, if you use one, you're going to
Yeah,
have a very flat cake. Let's
right.
put it that way. Because I
Yeah.
was like, what happened to this cake? It looks like a pancake. It doesn't look like a fluffy angel cake.
Mhm.
We use baking powder or baking soda. I'm like, there's a difference? They're like, this is why you're not a baker.
Yeah, a little more, precision is required, typically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Precision. That's exactly it. Bakers need to be precise. Whereas for me, I use cooking and I use it on pasta all the time. Like,
Mhm.
yes, I understand that people have a love of craft dinner. Like they're big KD fans. That really wasn't ever in my house.
Mhm.
Like for me, like KD is like the olive oil and toasted breadcrumbs with
Right.
some garlic and stuff.
Yeah.
That's to me is like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's my comfort food,
Right.
right? So I use it in pasta all the time. I use it in salads all the time. Like I don't understand people buying salad dressing. It freaks me out that people buy all these salad dressings. You know how
Yeah.
easy salad dressing is? Olive oil. If you like it, some mustard or lemon juice and a
Yeah.
little bit of vinegar. Shake it up. Ta-da!
That's what
Salt
I
and
do a lot of
pepper.
the times too. Maybe a little balsamic, a little olive oil, some salt,
Exactly.
pepper, there you go. And then you can make it fancier if you want, but yeah.
Exactly. Like I don't get it. I
Mhm.
like that's one of the things where it's like now you go to the store and there's all of these salad dressings.
Mhm.
Like, do you know how easy it is?
Yeah,
Like
with ingredients you probably already have at home.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then you're also having to buy like most of them are glass or plastic.
Mhm. So plastic is
So
very common in that aisle of the grocery
yes,
store.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is something that I disagree with.
Mhm.
Entirely. It's like, why are you stupid?
Yeah.
And like, I'm not okay. Caesar salads, sure, like they're a treat for me, but
Mhm.
am I going to buy like French's Italian salad dressing? Never.
Right.
I will never buy that because I know how to make my own, and and for me, it tastes perfect.
Right.
Yay, done.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause then you can season it exactly the way you like it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's basically how I use my olive oil. And again, especially in the summertime,
Mhm.
when I don't know about you, but if you've got a chlorinated pool or you're in the pool and you're in all of those chemicals, your skin gets so dry.
Mhm.
So like for me, and also in the wintertime here in Canada,
Yes. Oh, the
like
winters are brutal sometimes as far as, like, dry, cracked skin, it's Yeah, and I
Ugh.
tend to have more oily skin too, so yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I have like a little spritz bottle
Mhm.
and I just spritz olive oil, especially on your lower leg, because I don't know about you, but like that winter dry skin on your lower legs, they become so itchy.
Mhm.
Not with olive oil. Come out of the
Mm.
shower, spritz your lower leg with the olive oil. It will absorb. Like olive
Hmm.
oil absorbs into human skin. It doesn't stay topical like your skin absorbs it.
So it doesn't leave that greasy kind of skin feel afterwards?
No.
Like you might get with, I guess, sometimes coconut oil-based products or
I haven't used coconut oil topically, um,
Mhm.
just because I always have olive oil in the house.
Yeah.
So I'm just recently getting into coconut oil, so I'll have to do a comparison and let you know. And
Well,
just
what
say
I've
this.
done, I make a lot of body butter and I make it with basically it's coconut oil, olive oil, and beeswax, and that's what kind of keeps it emulsified. And I add like maybe some essential oils so it smells nice. But that does tend to have a much richer skin feel, so it doesn't really absorb into the skin. I don't mind that myself, but some people don't like that kind of really rich emollient. You kind of feel, I hate to say the word greasy, but you feel a little greasy for a bit afterwards.
Mhm.
And I love that feeling, but you know, not everybody likes that. Sometimes they want something to absorb into their skin faster. So maybe olive oil on its own would absorb faster than
Yeah, for
in
sure.
combination.
And Sophia Loren, like what she's
Yes.
always saying, how do you stay young? And she said olive oil.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's always
Okay.
saying, "Oh yeah, you look so young. How do you stay so young looking?" And she said olive oil. And like she doesn't mean just in her diet. Like
Right. She means on her skin
on
topically
her
too.
skin too.
Right.
And like that's like one of those like women's secrets in the South. It's just like, who has money to go to the store to buy some fancy creams?
Mhm.
Nobody,
Mhm.
right? So you better find whatever's in this house is what you're putting on your skin.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you know, that's basically how we're gonna stay healthy and youthful and feel nice is
Right.
with the
I'm gonna
olive.
have to start doing that more. I love that because I love olive oil and I wanna be using it more,
And
so
if you want to infuse it with stuff that will help you with, it's a great carrier oil for topicals. So if you
right.
want to infuse it with, say, you want to do lavender, or you want to do like lilac or sandalwood, whatever you want to do.
That would be so nice because it works beautifully with the fresh herbs. And I mean, that's more for a culinary purpose, but for using it on your body, you could really do all kinds of fun things with it. And it's so easy. Like you're putting your lavender right in the olive oil, you let it sit for a bit, you strain it. There you go. Label your jar
There,
and
there.
done.
No one's gonna have itchy legs in January.
Yeah. You're welcome, everybody. Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah. And when do you think you're going to be making it back to Italy next?
I'm really hoping next year. Really
Nice.
hoping.
Yeah.
Just because, there's been so many personal events that have made us stay in Canada for longer than expected.
Mhm.
And I really miss it. I really miss that valley so much
Mhm.
so. And I'm glad to see that at least our little village called Coleto is getting a lot more press in Italy saying, oh, we have two castles in this little village and la
Mhm.
la 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 la, come and see it. And it's nice to see that they're getting some attention because it's such a beautiful area. And like
Mhm.
the food is magnificent. Like I didn't
Mhm.
understand uh what like the swordfish steak was until like they brought you like it's the size of a steak. It's not
Mhm.
like a little triangle of fish. It's
Right.
like they literally cut that fish in half and then grilled it for you. There
Right.
you go. And
Yeah.
and every like there's so much fresh seafood. Like you can go to like a fish store where literally it's like, what'd you catch today? Like
Mhm.
it's been dead for 20 minutes.
Right.
You want to take it home and grill it? Perfect. So like I really miss that. And the first time I ever had fresh figs was in
Mm. And I love figs. I do. I've bought them dried, and anybody listening, they're delicious, but you can only eat a couple. because
Yeah,
they keep you regular.
they sure do.
I
They sure
found out the
do.
hard way. I was just yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we have figs on our property, and that was the first
Oh,
time I'd ever had like a fig directly just pick it off the tree and then stick it in your mouth. And like the figs that you get in Canada are quite dry, even if
yeah,
they
they're
are
dried
fresh.
figs. Yeah.
They're either dry, but even the fresh ones, when you bite into them, they're dry.
Mm,
Whereas the first time I had like a fresh fig right off the tree, it was like so juicy, it was like it made a mess.
wow.
And I was like, wow, this is what a fresh fig is.
Yeah.
And that to me is like the next time I go to Italy, I'm gonna try and like plan it for fig season,
Mhm.
because literally I will just take a chair from the kitchen and put it underneath the fig tree and go, what's for breakfast? I'll let
Right.
um,
I don't blame you. That sounds so lovely, and, like, Italy, olive oil, fresh figs, you have coffee, you have wine, you have cheeses, you have pizza, like, oh, it's a food and wine lover's dream, and I don't know what they've got for cannabis over there, but it's they must have a little bit. I don't know. I know it's not legal, obviously, but
it's not legal yet. You can grow hemp. Like
okay.
they've really delineated what cannabis is and what hemp is. And
Yeah.
I know that you can. They used to be Italy used to be the largest hemp producer in Europe.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's again, poor people. It's like rope. We can't go to the store and buy rope.
Yeah,
But
we can make
we
it
get this.
ourselves.
Well, we're gonna make it ourselves with this tall grass stuff right
Yeah,
here, right?
yeah,
And then Graham is gonna make tea with it,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So there is that, and definitely I would, because we have virgin land, I totally want to get into that sort of production as well, because the family who owned it, they were poor people, they weren't putting chemicals on their land. Who has money for chemicals? You know
Mhm.
what we're putting on it? Poo.
Right,
Hey,
which is great for soil mending. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and I really would be like, hey, if you're interested in doing some sort of collaboration, partnership, get in touch.
Right.
Because I would love to have the back 12 acres growing medicine.
Yeah. Then you would have it all.
Then I would totally have it
Literally
all.
have it all. That's
Oh,
amazing.
I
Yeah.
know. Like that to me is the dream, is to get. So if anyone here is listening
Yeah.
who would be interested in a partnership, hit me up.
Well, that's wonderful because I'll be sure to put all your contact stuff in the show notes, but before we go, where can people find you online?
They can find me online on Instagram, laurahamilton.cancan. And
LauraHamilton.can.
yeah, that's my Instagram
Perfect.
handle. Hit me up on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, but that's more like me just being foolish.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This is my balcony. Woo!
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you do a show as well.
I also do a show right now called Her Story on KGL TV.
Yeah. Wonderful. And you've had some amazing people on there. And I'm not trying to say that to toot my own horn because I was a recent guest, but guests like Anne Algin, author of Butter and Flour, who's also been a Bite Me guest. She's lovely. And lots of other interesting women that you've been able to interview. So, Laura, I just want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. You've got me really excited about olive oil again. Not that I wasn't before, but I'm
Yay!
definitely going to be going out and checking some of those specialty shops for some of this more interesting stuff than what I would find at my local Costco. So thank you for that.
You're
And
welcome.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you.